Permit me to start up and say, who is this little girl? Why at this time? Why are we sitting at this time? I want to share a story with you about a girl, a little girl. Who is she? It was so many years ago, over 50 years ago, in certain part of Liberia. And this part of Liberia, there was a little girl who was born in a home of a man who was married to the lady called Annie. And she was the only wife at that time. Later on, he has three other wives. And she was her wife. But she had four kids. But she was always born in good. And this time she came out again with another girl. And the father, which is her husband, heard. He was not around when the birth was given. He said, what kind of baby again? Is it a girl? He said, please, I heard she's bright, so I will send some napkin and pampers for her and some powders, but I don't really need that girl you in my house. And then he sent those things. He said, because of the color, she's not dark, she's bright. And they said she looked like me somehow. So he dropped off and left and just dropped those things. He didn't even come to see the baby. And my mother managed to get back home. Everybody celebrated the baby, but it's not in. But the little girl grew up from one level to another level. She had a grandmother who was prophetically sound, serving for the Assembly of God Church. And then she always come around and prophesied to all her children. But something happened to the little girl. When the little girl got to a certain level of her life, early stage of her life, between 2 3, she was very sickly. And then she was at a hospital. Every 2 weeks she's in hospital and very ill. And the kind of sickness I was on the little girl, you could see her heart is open. There's a hole deep. You could see the water dropping, coming down from the heart. Very terrible situation. And this water keep coming down from this little girl house, running down. And doctors then saw the heart, the hole in the heart, and they knew how do they close the hole first of all? How do they heal inside before closing it? And they always so. And this little girl mother was pregnant with the other child. And when she gets to the hospital, and she see the little girl, she feels so discouraged and she will go. But each time she got a friend who can play fun with her and say, oh, something happened to the little girl. Can you go and see? Something happened to this girl. Can you go and this? And she will run. So one day, she was into her last month of the other pregnancy. And when she got there, it was like there was a story given to her about this little girl. And then when there's a story given to her, and she stood up and said, God of this little girl, grandmother, let me say this to you today. I don't have interest in this little girl again. It's stress is just too much for me. I don't know what to do. I'm going through a lot and I have no idea how to handle this situation. But my desire and my request is do me this favor. Have this girl if you want her. But for me, I give up. I'm not running back here again with any information that I hear. Because every time, oh, she gone. Oh, she almost going. Oh, this is happening. But I can't stay here again. I'm leaving the little girl with you. Her grandmother and great grandmother serve you. They love you. And that's all I can make reference to. With the father, I can't say anything. But with this little girl, grandparents, I say something. So you can take her if you want her. But for me, I'm off this place. I'm not coming back. And she prayed sincerely in her own little understanding. And she left the little girl in the hospital and went away. And the moment she left, the little girl, grandmother God came in the hospital and touched this little girl. And touched this little girl, the hole in the heart where water was dripping from. The water dried up. The soul dried up. and the place began to close gradual. And the doctor came in, he saw something different than what he usually see. He said something wrong. He called people notice. He said something about this little girl. Who is this little girl? What is going on with this little girl? And can you imagine when he said, who is this little girl? And what is going on with the little girl? And this guy keeps saying, I see the days run out, the place is closer. He let somebody just closing it. He said, is another surgery doctor doing certain things about this little girl? And they keep doing that, and the hole eventually closed. And the little girl gained strength, and she sat down, and she began to ask for food, no more in the tube. And they began to give her food. The little girl ate and looked around and smiled. And the little girl began to talk. She had never talked. And she began to talk. I asked for her mom. They said her mom was not around. And the little girl got down and started making some move around. And that was how the little girl got healed, because her mother gave her up to Jesus, or she's on her own. But Jesus came and took this little girl. Could it be for this time? What is it? Where did the little girl come from? And Jesus gave the little girl life, and then she went back home. And the little girl been through a lot of things. Once she got to a certain age, there was a problem between her mom, the father, and the other women. She was feeling very embarrassed. She was not having time with her husband. She was going through a lot. Her last baby having to be a boy. So her husband did visit her, and I appreciate her. Thank you for giving me one boy, and there was a little friendship, but there was not much friendship because the women were getting too much. So she got upset. And then she got angry and walked out, left the little boy. The little girl was 2.5. The boy was just few months old. They left few months to be 1 year plus. And then this mother walked out in anger because she was the original woman, and there was other women, but she was the main one. So she just felt intimidated, felt shame, felt very angry, felt disappointed, and walked out of her home and left it with the rest of the people that just came in illegally. And so when she walked out, she left with the little boy and the little girl. And the little girl and the little boy stayed with the father. There was a good time, but when the women began to take possession, they began to have issues at certain time because they were still small, so the father was really helping to bring them out. So when the little girl and the little boy reached a certain age, the little girl began to sell from 9, 8, 9, 10. She will always sell, and they will pour her to afternoon school because she had to sell. And the little girl got to the age of 11, and she was still selling, and then going through some hardship in her little selling. And then something went wrong. When each time the little girl goes sell, the food is not, the sale is not finished. So go back, let the sale finish. And then she goes, she was on. So there was this guy who were always buying the little girl things. And then she won't go far. She would prefer going to this guy who always purchases her things. And she began to see it as a fun place to be. But a lot happened before this stage. But the little girl been through all of those things that happen in this stage. Cell where the high man, what they call the Freemason, chase the little girl up and down, wanted to kill her, but Mesa could not get her. But the little girl had a destiny. So the destiny giver and the destiny and protector was guiding the little girl as she was going through those hard time, hardship. And the little girl began to go from one place to another, find a solution of how her market would be finished. And in the process, very little girl, and in the process, when she was, in fact, first of all, the little girl was about, when she was about 9, they told her to leave the house. They sent her in the village. Where she went in the village, they got all the terrible things that goes in the toll in my place. They, they called it so many different names, and and the little girl has to go through some places where it was a. Can you imagine what the little girl go through all the things she went through. It was so sorrowful. And the little girl been through a lot, and while she was going through a lot, people didn't understand why the little girl was suffering the way she was suffering, because her stepmothers and other people was some of the people who were fighting against the destiny, and they want to see her destiny going the way it was going. And things went wrong. The little girl has so much to go through. But you know, there is a God who watches over everyone's destiny. The little girl, who is this little girl? Why is she going through what she's going? There are other children, but why is the little girl alone facing the things she was facing? And when the little girl came back, people began to talk to him. How can you be a great man who have a great potential, a great job, a company job, making so much money, and civilized man, and your child is in the village without no slipper going to school? The toes are all bad off. She's not moving well. She's not doing things well. How can you imagine that the little girl will survive the way you're doing things? How? This is very bad. Stop what you're doing. You got to do something about your child before you regret. You don't know what will become of this little girl, but what you're doing is very bad. Get her out of the village and get her back to the stage. Why would you treat her like that? That is your photocopy. That is the one that really look like you. Why would you do that? And he was having some fight here and there. And he took this little girl and went back. But when he brought the little girl, her legs were very bad with all those terrible uh, image that goes into the toes to get them out. They become so big, very terrifying. And they brought this image out of her toes, sometimes 20, sometimes 20, 25, sometimes 26. And the little girl went through a lot. But when she came back, she started this business again. And this time, the little girl decided she needed to go to school. So what would she do? And the little girl would go to where the people can go and buy it and then sell the things to those guys. And she found out one guy would just pay for all the market. And that's where the little girl was until the little girl got pregnant. And this time she was about 13 years old. The little girl got pregnant. And she knowing she having the baby, the people were upset and asked the little girl to leave. In fact, at the age of 11, they asked the little girl to leave, but she was just hanging around the environment, couldn't go far because she's so little. And she stays around until at the age of 12 when she was pregnant now, they eventually allow her to leave the premises. And the little girl went to this guy who used to buy the food at them, and the little girl went to him. He decided to get a wife. A little girl is free, small little girl, and took her to town and began to take care of the little girl. In the process, she got a second child. And can you imagine two little girls the little girl had? And she's a little girl, she know nothing, and she don't know what to do. And in the process, she lost the two baby because she don't know what to do with the two baby. So the girl went through a lot. She began to hustle how to survive. In a period of some time, about 3 to 4 years later, she had the third child. But this time she was a little bit stronger, and then she could do small things and she managed, but then she wanted to go back to school. One thing about this little girl, her dream was to go to school. She wanted to know. She wanted to know with that power of her father, and she could not get access to good education. She stayed, wanted to go to school. Every move she would ask people, can I go to night school? Can you help me? And the little girl stayed, become to sell to be able to go to school. She was even staying with some people too, and they were still messing time with her. But in everything the little girl was doing, she was learning too many things and going through the process. And the little girl wanted to go through everything she has to go through. It was an amazing to know what she was going through. But the little girl continued living the way she was living. And then she went through when the night school, she had a third child, and then after the little girl had a desire to move for one level, she phoned her mother and then gave her mother the third child to carry because she don't want to lose the third child. And in the process, the little girl got the fourth child, which was a little boy now. But at this time, she was in the senior class and she could not make it. And then she managed to struggle, tie her stomach, and end the school year. The day of graduation, the little girl could not go for graduation because the stomach was extremely big, and the little girl had to be put out. But she managed to sit. But in the few while, the people didn't want to see something before they disqualify her. So the little girl has to leave to go home. And in the process of going home, she has to pack up to go to the city.